Hey, welcome back to the channel. Something strange is happening in North America's auto industry. A move that was supposed to strengthen America, but might end up doing the opposite. A few weeks ago, Stellantis, the parent company of Jeep, announced it was relocating production of the Jeep Compass from Brampton, Ontario to Belvidere, Illinois.
Stellantis is moving production from this assembly plant in Brampton, Ontario, across the border to Illinois.
And we're not just going to sit here and say that's okay because it's not okay. They've made commitments to this plant.
The company closed the plant in 2023, temporarily laying off 3,000 workers.
At first glance, it looked like a patriotic victory for Washington and a setback for Canada. But the deeper you look, the more it starts to feel like a story of misplaced confidence. The company's goal seemed clear: avoid Trump's new 25% import tariffs by producing inside the United States. The plan fit neatly into a $13 billion, four-year investment to expand domestic output and create 5,000 new jobs. But almost immediately, markets pushed back. Stellantis shares fell in a single day, as analysts warned that high American labor costs, soaring energy prices, and Buy American compliance rules would erase any savings the move was meant to bring. Meanwhile, in Canada, the reaction was swift but strategic. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Ontario Premier Doug Ford didn't lash out. They signaled control.
CTV News has obtained a letter by Jolie to the president of Stellantis today, stressing Stellantis agreed with the governments of Canada and Ontario to maintain its full Canadian footprint, including Brampton, in exchange for substantial financial support. Anything short of that commitment will be considered a default under our agreement.
We will make sure that we push the company and we hold them to account.
Both emphasized that Stellantis was still bound by existing employment and investment commitments, and Ottawa quietly began invoking legal clauses that would make it costly for the automaker to fully withdraw. And now a quiet question hangs over this entire story. Did Canada just get outplayed? Or did Stellantis walk straight into a trap of its own making? Before we dive deeper, hit that like button if you're finding this eye-opening. It really helps us beat the algorithm.
Emotionally, it's very hard because there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, we got 3,000 members in that Brampton assembly plant, 1,000 plus members that supply that plant and the parts supplier base.
Stellantis, which is known for brands like Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, and Fiat, reporting that the U.S. president's auto tariffs have so far cost the company $480 million Canadian.
But that's only the beginning of the story, because the real trap wasn't in Brampton or Belvidere. It was hidden inside Washington's own trade policy. When Trump's new tariff package took effect on April 3, 2025, it changed the entire logic of global car manufacturing overnight. A 25% import tax on all vehicles and light trucks built outside the U.S. meant that every supply chain Stellantis had spent years optimizing was suddenly upside down. The company's European-built components, its cross-border flow of parts from Mexico and Canada, all of it was now more expensive, slower, and tangled in red tape. By the end of the second quarter, Stellantis had absorbed roughly $300 million in extra costs. Its first-half net loss hit $2.3 billion, about $2.68 billion, and analysts at Jefferies warned that if the policy continued, the total EBIT impact could climb past $7 billion by year's end. Factories across Michigan and Indiana were forced into temporary shutdowns, while 2 Jeep models imported from Mexico were suspended altogether. Roughly 900 American workers found themselves on pause, waiting for clarity that never came. Trump called it proof that America is winning again. But the company's balance sheets told a different story, one where protectionism was costing more than it was saving. If you've made it this far, you probably care. Consider subscribing to stay updated. Meanwhile, north of the border, Canada didn't just protest, it acted. While Washington framed the move as a win for America first, Ottawa quietly turned the tables. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly reminded Stellantis that it was still legally bound to its 2022 EV investment commitments. Any reduction in jobs or output could trigger penalties under those agreements. Behind closed doors, officials began reviewing legal options that would classify the relocation as a breach of contract, allowing Canada to demand compensation or assign new production work to Brampton. Ontario Premier Doug Ford backed the move, urging Ottawa to answer Trump in the only language he understands, firm action. And Ottawa delivered. It activated the safety valves built into the EV deal, compelling Stellantis to maintain parts and component production in Canada. In the end, the company couldn't fully walk away, tied down not by politics, but by contracts and Canada's quiet mastery of industrial control. While Brampton faced uncertainty, Windsor began to rise. What started as a potential crisis quickly evolved into a story of adaptation and quiet recovery. To offset lost Jeep production, Stellantis added a third shift at the Windsor assembly plant, increasing capacity and preserving hundreds of jobs. The Ontario government expanded its retraining programs, reallocating more than 2,000 Brampton workers to the Next Star EV battery project, a joint venture between Stellantis and LG Energy Solution worth nearly $5 billion Canadian dollars. Now entering its operational phase, Next Star Energy is projected to create around 2,500 high-quality positions in Windsor, cementing the region's role in North America's electric future. Meanwhile, the Unifor Union pushed to extend federal and provincial employment support through 2027, ensuring stability across the workforce. Within 6 months, Ontario had not only contained the fallout, it had turned it into momentum. A disruption once seen as a loss became the foundation of a new industry, built on flexibility rather than fear. Across the border in Illinois, reality hit harder than expected. For Stellantis, coming home to America turned out to be far more expensive than staying in Canada ever was. What the company saved at the border, it was now paying back, with interest, inside the United States. Labor costs in Illinois ran 25 to 30% higher than in Ontario, and energy prices spiked nearly 40% after the 2025 rollback of federal fuel subsidies. At the same time, strict Buy American regulations forced Stellantis to rebuild its entire supply chain with domestic parts, choking logistics and slowing deliveries. Production efficiency collapsed. U.S. plants were operating at barely 52% capacity, leaving thousands of vehicles unfinished and sitting idle on factory lots. Add to that the restructuring fees and platform depreciation, and the company faced an additional $3.3 billion in net costs. Investors were blunt in their assessment. Stellantis hadn't escaped a problem. It had simply traded a political crisis for a financial one. Canada, meanwhile, turned what looked like a corporate setback into proof of resilience. Rather than panic, Ottawa treated the Stellantis crisis as a stress test for its new industrial model, one built on stability, not pressure. Through a web of EV, critical mineral, and logistics agreements, the government ensured that foreign investors couldn't simply pull out overnight. Domestic reinvestment began to rise, with more than $1.2 billion Canadian dollars flowing back into the Windsor-Essex region to support local suppliers and component makers. Unemployment in Ontario stayed steady at around 5.6%, even as auto parts exports to the European Union climbed 18% in the third quarter of 2025. In global markets, Canada increasingly came to be seen as a safe harbor amid North America's trade turbulence, predictable, rules-based, and insulated from political swings. While the U.S. wrestled with tariff shocks and industrial slowdowns, Canada quietly strengthened its position as the region's EV hub, proving that calm, consistent policy can sometimes be the most powerful response. The Stellantis story reveals a new paradox in global manufacturing. Moving a factory no longer guarantees survival. It tests a nation's ability to adapt. What once looked like a tactical escape from tariffs has become a cautionary tale about the true cost of instability. Every time a corporation shifts production to avoid a policy shock, it trades short-term relief for long-term risk, losing supply chain balance, efficiency, and trust. Canada managed to hold its ground through legal precision and flexible governance, while the U.S. stumbled under higher costs and political volatility. The reshoring trend may continue, but profits aren't following the factories home. Many global manufacturers are quietly rethinking their presence in the U.S., eyeing Canada, Mexico, and the EU as more predictable destinations for investment. Analysts warn that if Washington doubles down on tariffs, North America's industrial map could be redrawn, one where power flows toward the countries that stay steady, not loud. And that raises a deeper question. In this new age of economic nationalism, who truly controls the game? Governments that set the rules, or supply chains that decide where to play? Because in the end, the Stellantis saga isn't just about cars or tariffs. It's about how nations define control in a world where borders can't protect value, and resilience might be the only real advantage left. If this video gave you something to think about, like and subscribe to support more content like this. Thank you.